A hush falls the moment a delegation steps off a plane and into a place that has long been defined by the soil beneath its feet. The image that lit up timelines was simple and undeniable: a group of dignitaries climbing the steps of the presidential palace. They arrived from a Gulf nation known for trade and sovereign investment. They arrived in a country where the earth has gold buried close enough for whole communities to stake their lives on each season's yield. In that meeting room, far from the mines and the pits, decisions and questions began to line up like coins on a table. Tonight we will follow that delegation into the palace and then down to the mines. We will explain how large gold transactions are actually executed. We will name the winners and the losers that could be created by the deals discussed. And we will give you the exact questions to demand of leaders, investors and auditors if you want to know whether the coming deals will build a future rather than borrow it. Begin with the metal. Gold is not a symbol here, it is a system. For generations foreign companies have extracted or taken it abroad, and returned to the country only a fraction of the value they removed. Meanwhile, families who toil in artisanal pits watch as the profits of the trade crystallize elsewhere. That dynamic is changing because political leaders have made a public choice. The state will try to capture a greater share of the value of its minerals by insisting that more processing happen inside the country and that more revenue be recorded and spent in public budgets. Those policy decisions have already reshaped mining permits and the way big contracts are negotiated. They also create a new bargaining table for outsiders who wish to invest. At the center of these changes stands the head of state, a young military leader who rose to power amid turbulent politics and who has made economic sovereignty a recurring theme of his rule. He speaks often about taking back control of national resources and about ensuring that natural wealth works for ordinary citizens rather than for distant shareholders. For many in the country, his message resonates as corrective justice. For investors, it is a clear signal: to succeed here, any project must respect the state's insistence on domestic value creation and on tight oversight. Into that environment arrived senior representatives of a Gulf investment authority. They were received at the presidential palace. They discussed economic cooperation, potential projects, and the contours of investment that could benefit both sides. That much is confirmed by official statements. Running parallel to those formal messages were viral posts, videos, and pundit pieces that carried a more sensational line: that a private billionaire from the Gulf had arrived specifically to buy massive quantities of gold directly from the state. That claim captured imaginations, but it is the type of headline that moves faster than paperwork. The difference between a verified meeting about long-term cooperation and an unconfirmed claim of instant, headline-grabbing bulk purchase is enormous, and conflating the two distorts both the politics and the economics at stake. If a legitimate private purchase of large quantities of gold were to be arranged, the steps are many and precise. First, provenance matters. Every kilogram would require legal title and a documented chain of custody from the mine to a secure holding point. Independent assayers would test samples and issue certificates of purity. Contracts would be drawn to include delivery terms, insurance, quality guarantees, and settlement mechanisms. International banks would be involved or at least apprised, because the movement of large sums of money for high-value commodities triggers anti-money laundering procedures and know-your-customer checks. Escrow arrangements with reputable intermediaries would be expected to protect both buyer and seller during the verification window. Security firms and bonded carriers would manage the physical transfer, using secure storage and encrypted tracking to reduce the risk of theft. In short, a single, secretive transfer of tons of gold contradicts the documented, boring, legally heavy processes that protect legitimate global trade. That is why many investors prefer structured models to headline-grabbing one-off purchases. One common model is an offtake agreement, where an investor commits to buy a defined share of future production over an extended period, under agreed terms. That creates steady revenue and market certainty for the producing country and supply predictability for the buyer. Another model is capital investment in domestic refining capacity. An investor funds the building or upgrading of a refinery, and in return receives secured access to processed metal or a share in the refined output. This approach aligns with the state's desire for domestic value addition. A third model is a joint venture where capital, technical know-how, and governance safeguards are shared, often with public disclosure and independent auditing to assure the public that outcomes are fair. Each model reduces incentives for smuggling, increases traceability, and creates a framework where benefits are more likely to be shared. The people in the pits, however, often sit closest to the consequences. Artisanal miners operate with hand tools and a few basic machines. They extract ore under precarious conditions and sell to informal buyers who offer quick cash. Formalizing these livelihoods is one of the largest challenges and opportunities that any investor can meaningfully address. A refinery or large-scale operation that creates training, employment, and purchasing arrangements for local miners can lift entire communities. Conversely, projects that centralize control and exclude smallholders can accelerate dispossession and deepen inequality. Environmental risks are also real. Unregulated mining causes deforestation, water contamination, and toxic tailings that poison rivers. Any credible partnership must include enforceable environmental safeguards, community compensation plans, and transparent hiring commitments. We must look at the region too. In recent years, the country has shifted parts of its foreign policy. Traditional security ties were reassessed, new partners were courted, and the government projected a posture of increased self-reliance. That geopolitical repositioning colors how external investment is perceived. Economic agreements are rarely seen as purely commercial, they are read as diplomatic gestures with strategic meaning. For investors, that increases the stakes. A deal that appears to privilege one foreign power over others will be scrutinized not only for its financial merits but also for its geopolitical implications. Another reality is how fragile the sector's financial systems can be under stress. Independent audits and transparency initiatives have long highlighted discrepancies between reported output and declared exports. Smuggling and undervaluation have siphoned value away from public coffers. Strengthening custody chains, publishing sales and audits, and involving third-party verifiers are practical ways to reduce those losses. The best reforms pair capacity building inside the state with independent monitoring and public disclosure so that citizens can hold leaders accountable. From a financial standpoint, large buyers and banks worry about reputation and compliance as much as price. Global financial institutions will require documented chains of custody and clear beneficial ownership disclosures. They will not easily finance transactions that look opaque. Insurers, likewise, price security risks into their contracts and may refuse to cover shipments if political violence or weak rule of law increases the chance of loss. Those market realities create practical brakes on headline-friendly instant wealth scenarios. There are also technical choices that determine whether a project benefits the many or the few. Will refined metal be exported, or will it be sold to processing partners who add value locally? Will revenue streams be ring-fenced to finance schools, clinics, and roads in mining regions or diverted to general budgets with minimal local accountability? Which institutions will audit the books and which civil society groups will be allowed to ask the uncomfortable questions? Answers to these governance questions tilt the balance between durable development and short-term enrichment. We should examine a few realistic scenarios so we can judge the likely outcomes. In the optimistic scenario, investors and the state negotiate a long-term partnership that funds a domestic refinery, commits to local hiring and environmental standards, and publishes independent audits of both payments and environmental performance. In that case, local suppliers and artisanal miners are integrated into formal supply chains, the government secures a reliable revenue stream, and the country builds technical capacity that creates jobs beyond extractive work. In the pessimistic scenario, an opaque cash sale concentrates wealth in a narrow circle, environmental rules are ignored, and public oversight is sidelined in the rush to close the deal. That outcome risks social backlash, reputational harm, and international scrutiny. What is the role of the media and creators in this moment? The answer is simple and moral: to demand evidence and to hold accountable. Viral clips and breathless headlines are useful for attention, but they are poor substitutes for documents, signed agreements, and audited transfers. Reporters must ask to see contracts, auditors must publish findings, and creators should avoid repeating unverified claims as fact. Put another way, transparency is the single most practical guard against both corruption and rumor. There are also practical steps citizens and communities can demand now. First, require publication of any memoranda of understanding, joint venture terms and payment mechanisms. Second, insist on independent environmental and social impact assessments that are not merely filed but that inform enforceable conditions. Third, demand a role for local voices in oversight committees so that those most affected are not merely consulted after decisions are taken. Fourth, push for audits by recognized international firms whose results are publicly released. These steps do not guarantee perfect outcomes, but they create pressure points that make abuse more costly and visible. Now let us return to the human stories, because where policy meets people, the consequences are immediate. Imagine a village whose river has been contaminated by runoff from an informal processing site. Children fall sick. The local primary school has no roof. A well-structured investment can build a modern processing facility with strict environmental controls, fund safe water and health centers, and train local technicians. But the opposite model, one that centralizes profit and ignores community needs, will deepen grievances and create fertile ground for instability. That is the moral geometry that should guide any negotiation. For viewers who want to act, there are concrete ways to help. Support independent local journalism that investigates contracts and audits. Push social platforms to label unverified claims and to prioritize primary documents over rumor. If you have verifiable eyewitness accounts or documents, share them with reputable journalists or civil society organizations that can verify and protect sources. Public pressure matters, it shapes whether deals are sealed in public light or behind closed doors. As we near the close of this narrative, it is time to ask the questions that will define what happens next. If an outside investor offers immediate liquidity for large stores of metal, should the state accept that cash to address urgent public needs, or should it insist on investment tied to domestic refining and long-term development? If the state pursues a path of national control and higher royalties, how will it balance the need to maintain investor confidence with the imperative to secure fair returns for its people? And who will be the independent watchdogs that prevent the deal from becoming an elite windfall? Those are not abstract dilemmas, they are living choices with consequences for the next generation. Before we end, a direct invitation to you. If you want to see the documents that substantiate our reporting, ask for them in the comments and we will pursue them. If you want in-depth episodes that include interviews with miners, legal experts, financial analysts, and environmental scientists, tell us which voices you want us to prioritize. We will seek out testimony from people who work with their hands in the pits, from engineers who build refineries, from auditors who read contracts, and from lawyers who understand the binding clauses that shape outcomes. Your input will guide our reporting. Finally, a clear and simple closing. If you value measured, document-driven reporting, subscribe to this channel so we can keep pursuing the full record. Like this video to tell us to continue producing deep explainers. Comment with the single question you want answered about these meetings and the future of the country's gold, and we will chase it down. We read every comment and we will make this reporting better because of your engagement.